we're just really, really privileged that he keeps coming back to perform us. Whatever the hell he's going to do when he gets up here, put him together for Ski!
So sometimes when I come here, I already have what I have to do in mind, and I just am going over it. Other nights I get here and I try to get inspiration from what everyone else is doing on stage. Tonight, I'm kind of torn between two things, and I can't read the crowd well enough, so I'll ask you. Would you rather I sing some slightly slower, but hopefully very beautiful and interesting songs, or would you like to hear a rant about justice?
Rant!
Rant. Sounds good. All right. So I have a couple kids. I have a 6-year-old and I have a 3-year-old. And just the other day, my wife and I, you don't understand how early kids start misbehaving, and not casually, but very intentionally misbehaving. And she came into the kitchen, and there he was. He'd managed to push a chair over, climb onto the chair, get onto the cabinet, and had his hands in the cookie jars and his face just covered with chocolate chip smears. And we've talked about this before. We're trying to maintain a level of discipline in our house. So she picked him up, washed off his face, brought him outside, and chopped his hands off for stealing. Now, of course, this is not real. This is absolutely ludicrous. You would never do this, because one of the points of justice is appropriateness of the justice. You don't chop off somebody's hands for stealing a cookie. You also don't do that type of punishment for somebody who is that young. You reserve punishment for people who very knowingly and in adult understanding commit these crimes. So right there we have the first two parts of justice. You have to understand that what you're doing is wrong at a real level. Understand the nature of consequences and actions. And you also have to have justice that's appropriate to the crime. How about this? One of my kids is walking down the street, go to a playground. While he's at the playground, another kid runs by full speed, bunks him over, and just scrapes his face all to hell, right on the concrete. Just it's torn down a couple layers of skin, and it's bleeding, and he's screaming, crying, and bruising. Well, of course, I went over to the other parent, and I said, hey, your kid ran by and knocked my son over, and now he's bleeding. I pulled out a sharp razor, and I just cut the little fucker's face, because, So not only is that not appropriate, it's a little blood for a little blood, but the whole point of justice is not about revenge. Just because someone has hurt you does not mean the justice that is applied in return is just. You can't put somebody in prison just because you don't like them or because they hurt you. If you get a divorce, you can't electrocute your ex for, 5 minutes every day for the next 5 years, no matter how much pain you feel inside. Justice is not given by weighing pain equally on both sides. So what do we talk about when we talk about justice? Well, the first type of justice is something small, like a fine. We give these fines because we want to negatively reinforce it. Say, don't do this. If you do this, you're going to get in trouble. Here's a little something to let you know you fucked up. The second thing is maybe we put somebody in jail for a period of time. This is a significantly harsher penalty. Not only are we giving you negative reinforcement by taking you away from the things that you love and putting you in some place where you better not drop the soap, which is its own wrongness, but we're now removed you from society so you can no longer threaten society. And finally, the last card that justice can play is a death penalty. We can decide that someone is so harmful to the system that they simply cannot be allowed to survive. And so we kill them. Now, two of these three styles focus on something very important. The whole goal is to change the nature of the criminal, to make them not do that again. There's a very important concept in justice called the recidivism rate, or the return rate. It's how many prisoners, once released, will find their way back into the prison system. And this is a huge number, and America does a terrible, terrible job of this. And there's some really interesting reasons why, and some other countries do it better than us. But it's important because this determines how good we are at reforming people, at helping them get back and become useful members of society. Now, there's one more little thing I want to talk about quick. So let's say that my son stealing cookies again, and my daughter looks at him and goes, you're stealing cookies. She does this all the time. You're stealing cookies, you're going to get in so much trouble. But let's say he doesn't get in trouble. Let's say he steals a cookie anytime he wants for the next 15 years. Goes off to college. One day he comes back from college. Oh, cookies. Grabs a cookie out of the jars, walking around the house. My wife, told you should have been stealing cookies. Bam! Shoots his fucking knee off. Now, not only is this once again wildly inappropriate, but another key part of justice is time. You can't let somebody continuously, knowingly get away with a crime and not say something. Now, it doesn't matter if somebody else said, that's wrong. You have to have the authority come by and say, what you are doing is incorrect, and if you continue doing it, you will be punished. So now we've talked about justice, we've talked about recidivism rate, we've talked about the timeliness of it, we've talked about you have to have the knowing, the understanding of it. We've talked about its appropriateness, and we've talked that it's not revenge. So now I'm going to take us at a 90-degree angle where we've been going, and I'm going to talk about hell. Hell is an eternal punishment. There's no parole board. There's no getting out. It is the worst type of justice you can possibly inflict. There is no recidivism. You can never leave. You can't walk out of here a changed man. You can't become less of a threat to society in a life that never ends and is forever segregated. It is revenge in many ways, since the only person who is slighted long enough for that is God himself. And I have discussed this many times. I understand the nature of the sin is sin against perfect, and thus the crime is perfectly abhorrent. But that's not how we feel it. As children of God, supposedly, we're much like the children that I used over and over in my story, in that we do not come into this with full knowing. You can say, well, it's published out there, but the fact is, there are a lot of things, a lot of really good reasons to look at the various religions of the world and say, I don't think you have a solid grasp on this as you think you do. So we don't come into this with knowing. There is no recidivism. There is no protecting society. There is no getting better. There is no negative reinforcement because there is nothing that follows it. So my point for tonight is one of the reasons I do not accept the typical view of Christianity is because they maintain a reality of hell that I find to be unjust and thus impossible for a good God to put in place. Thank you.
That's ski! Round of applause from them.